Got the pianos today. Lazy Money Machine podcast. Welcome to...
What happened there? It cut out.
No. It's just a break in the music. It's okay. Graham Brown, Erik ten Have, Lazy Money Machine podcast, where we grab things from the internet, articles, and we discuss anything that has to do with basically with lifestyle design and making passive income. Two things that we're both very passionate about. And today is no different. I went out again and I found something, and let's listen to the first audio clip.
You've said you have no friends.
This is true, and everybody gets upset about this. The problem is when you get known in the world, a lot of people bother you. They want to be your friend because, and this and that, and this is...
Everybody needs something.
Correct. And therefore I protected myself against these constant attacks. Somebody says, I'm your friend, and can you do this, and can you do that, or I want an autograph, or whatever. And to stop all this in a way, I protected myself and said, where are the real friends? A real friend is a 24-hour guy who can talk about any kind of problems you have. And I tell you, honestly, I would not know one where I would do that, because I protected myself.
Nikki Lauda.
Oh, wow. Blimey.
Yeah, so I thought this was, funny. He did a very long interview, and we will touch on some other aspects of the interview. But this was the one that was early on in the interview, and this really hit me, where he said, I've basically protected myself and I have no friends. And
no friends?
No friends, he says. I have no friends. And the reason for that is because everybody wants something from me, and that's why I decided, okay, I'm just going to be a jerk and not have anybody. Because he says, if I'm in trouble now, I wouldn't know who to call. And I thought, wow.
So let's put it into context. If people don't know, he was the Formula One racer from the 80s, right? And he had a terrible crash, didn't he?
Yeah, there's a movie made about it, Rush.
Okay.
Yeah.
He has his own racing team now as well. I'm not sure if that's sort of...
No, he is...
Formula 3.
I think he's involved with Mercedes, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
But he used to be...
He used to have Lauda Racing, didn't he? Which I think was...
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So what are you saying? Are you saying that he's a sad dude because he doesn't have any friends, or what?
Well, what was interesting to me about this is, besides the fact that he's a race driver, he had this terrible accident. If you see him, most of his face was burned. He was in the hospital for a long time. And like I said, I would encourage you to watch the movie Rush. It's amazing. 40 days after he crashed and burned most of his body, he was back in a race car racing again.
Wow.
So this guy, he has balls, and he definitely has perseverance. But apparently, on the flip side of that, I thought there would be some sort of a soft side to him. But he's quite a hard, a hard-notched guy. And by saying, like, I've got no friends, I basically banned everybody out of my life because everybody wants something from me.
Yeah,
I thought it was amazing.
It's not good, though. It's not healthy, surely.
Yeah, so he says, the only people that I would consider a friend would be somebody I can call in the middle of the night and talk about anything. And he says, I don't have anybody.
Wow. So maybe there's an extreme, isn't there, that we talk about being very mindful, I think is the word, aware of who you hang around with.
Right.
Because there are people that come into your life that could be negative as well as there are people that could be positive, right? But there's an extreme, isn't there? There's not having anybody in your life, which is too extreme on that. It's like, if you take a computer, if you plug into the internet, you're going to get into trouble because there's going to be viruses and stuff like that. So, the extreme is not to plug your computer into the internet, right?
Right.
It's the same sort of thing. Is it? I don't know. I don't think that's a good strategy I think he's gone too far, no?
I think so too, but for him, that's like the flip side of success. Let's move on to the next part of the interview.
How do you view money?
For me, it's easy to say. If I have money, it's fine. If I don't have money, I can adjust always to the money situation. I have no problem traveling tomorrow with scheduled planes, if this is the case, because I always had my feet on the ground. If I'm able to fly a private plane, I certainly prefer it. Easier, nicer, but I can do without it. I don't have the importance. I want a private plane. Sure, I want a private plane if I can afford it. In this relationship, I'm always unaffected by all this so-called wealth, because I know if it's here, I use it. If it's not here, I can be as happy as before.
At least that's what he claims.
Yeah.
He's a multi-millionaire. He still flies private planes. I'm trying to check, but he's still involved with Formula One. I think he's a significant player. I think in the Mercedes team. Yeah.
It's interesting how those Formula One drivers turn out compared to athletes, because in a way there isn't a lot of difference. They're found very young. They're often trained really hard to become number one in their field, and they're paid massive salaries. And we talked about those athletes who earn seven-figure salaries, in NFL, NBA, and how many of them go bankrupt in their career. But Formula One drivers, it doesn't seem to be the case, that they tend to do very well. They earn similar kind of salaries.
You know what? I think it's the same like with, tennis players sometimes fail. Boris Becker failed, as we discussed in another episode. But I think, especially for Formula One drivers, they are in a cycle of, I think it's like about 8 months that the season lasts. They don't really have time to party and spend it all, right? They are so full on working. It's really intensive. And I think they are in a professional sport with lots of people around them. So I think that's the other good thing about that sport, right? They have lots of sports support systems around them for the race, but they can also easily find people that help them with the money side, I think.
Right. I think as well, a lot of Formula One drivers have come from, I don't think they come from poor families. I mean, it's an expensive business to get into Formula One.
Very expensive.
Right. So I think the people that put their kids into Formula One already have some kind of financial nous to play with, right? They're not, they're not coming without role models, are they?
That's right.
That's the problem we talked about before. So that impacts their attitude towards wealth as well. I mean, Nikki Lauda says he remains kind of unaffected. I don't know if that's the case, but if he is, then, that's good for him, because, that can come and go as easily as success.
Yeah. Well, for me, I mean, after listening to some interviews with him today, he's a very inspiring guy to me, that he is very black and white on how he sees things for himself, for his life. But he went through enormous adversity and came back. And he doesn't let anybody get to him, basically. He really hardened because of his accident and also because of the way he looks. But he is still, successful and doing a lot of things that he loves, and, financially is in absolutely no bad place at all, I think.
Do you think that's because of his crash? I mean, if anybody sees, just go Google this guy, Nikki Lauda, and you'll see what it did to him in his face, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
Do you think that the crash made him like that? I don't know what he was like before.
Maybe. I mean, let's listen to this. He talks here about taking risks.
You like taking big risks. Why?
Because I always took risks. I'd never been, let's say, called normal. I tell you one thing. We are living today in a very streamlined world that everybody thinks if we need WhatsApp or Twitter or whatever, what is the President Trump using?
Twitter.
Huh?
Twitter, right.
This is a good example that if the president uses it, then everybody has to use it. And if I understand that these streams are happening, I, funny enough, always think the opposite. Because even in my racing competition, if I understood that one guy is doing one thing and is not successful, why should I follow him? So I have this learning out of my long experience, even in business decisions or private decisions. If everybody goes one direction, I think immediately the other way. And I tell you, from decisions I've taken the other direction, I would say I was 90% right. it takes a while for the people who all streamline in one direction. There's one guy who's doing it the other way. I'm quicker thinking the other way first than to follow what everybody thinks is right. Because that gets me revved up here, what is right and what is wrong. So whenever these developments in the world get, I first of all think the other way around, and there's a lot of people are going in one direction. I'm much quicker going in the other one.
Yeah, so he's a rebel, right? That's clear.
Yeah, it's hard though. You have to live an examined life, don't you? You have to question everything.
Yeah. And what surprises me, he doesn't seem to have like a base of, okay, I'm doing, this part of my life is stable money, income, etc., and then the other part I'm gambling. No, in a lot of his business decisions, I mean, he started an airline. I think you're right. He started the Formula One team himself. He basically goes, I'm just going to go and do it and take the risk. And I find that amazing. Yeah? He basically goes through life taking risk because what he says is, everything is so streamlined and I don't want to follow the stream.
Yeah. Yeah. And, just be confident in yourself that you can do that. I mean, I suppose in a way it's trained from an early age, isn't it? With the kind of world that they get into, they have to take risks, but it's not just, you don't have to be a Formula One driver to be like that. I think because they're surrounded by people who take risks all the time. You surround yourself with people who are comfortable, then, it's going to be hard to make those decisions.
Yeah.
What was the name of the movie? Interested now.
Rush. Yeah, it's a really good movie.
I'll check that out.
Movie Rush. It's also a rock band.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, it's a really good movie. It talks about his life, and it also talks about, he was extremely competitive, and that hasn't gone away. And I think, we were talking about role modeling, I think, in the previous episode, how Mike Tyson might have not had a good role model in his life for, learning things. Role models can come from different areas, it turns out, right? I was quite inspired by this guy, although he's not very close to what I'm normally doing. But the way he lives his life, and especially now, how he speaks about, how shall I say this? How he speaks about taking risks and how he, talks about his friendships. I was quite inspired. So role modeling can come from everywhere. Basically, you can, if you dive into people's lives, you can find out lots about them that could apply to you.
Well, there's a good example, isn't it? We asked in the last podcast when we're talking about TV, we were also talking about Mike Tyson, where we absorb our stories from.
Yeah.
You may not be surrounded by these people, but you can go out. This information's out there, isn't it? You could watch a movie like Rush, or you could watch 3 hours of Games of Thrones.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones, whatever it's called. Sorry. Yeah. But it's just that you consciously choose you make a decision. Like in the same way Nikki Lauda's made a conscious decision about what's good and what's bad in his life, we have to make conscious decisions about the stories we absorb in our life. So you could watch this movie, listen to this life story, or you could watch some crap which is just going to leave you brain dead.
Yeah.
3 hours later, right?
And I think for me, the lesson from this particular episode is, I think, it's not so bad to just take quite clear stance in your life on what you want, where you want to go, who you want to hang out with. And don't be afraid to be quite hard on yourself and maybe on your life. I personally find that if I make, tougher decisions quicker, I usually feel more relieved and things go easier because, this seemed to be, instead of dwelling on it, for me, dwelling on things really is getting me into a bad state. So I found it quite nice to listen to a guy that has no problems with quick decision making clearly and taking a stance, and I found that very inspiring.
I love that, taking a stand, right? How important that makes you feel empowered. Like, not worry about the fact that you have an opinion or a way of doing things which may rustle the feathers of other people. Because that's you, and celebrate that. Just as an example, people think I'm a bit OCD, and for years and years, I was criticized for it. I am OCD. Just an example which should make you laugh is I organize stuff in the fridge.
Oh, no.
I compartmentalize stuff in the fridge and put it into boxes. This is like, this is my celery and it goes into this box and this is how it's cut and this is how I'm like that.
Okay.
And for years, people would laugh at that, whether it's like housemates or family or whatever, and said, you're weird. But now I'm like, this is me.
Yes.
And I actually like that. And this is, I'm not going to edit that. And I think it's kind of like going back to Nikki Lauda. I'm not talking about celery.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about, having a viewpoint and saying, this is me. This is what I stand for. And if you don't like it, then you don't belong in my life.
And what I also find is that if you take these stands and you talk about it, people find it interesting because you're one of few people that is clear about what you want in your life, I think. So Lauda said, and I wanted to close off with that. And I didn't edit it out of the interview, but he's very burnt, right? His face is very burnt. So he says basically, if I meet somebody that is hard to me, because a lot of people don't dare to look him in the eye, or they want him to take his cap off to show, the scars on his face. So basically what he then says to them is, I've got a good reason to look ugly. You don't.
Wow.
And I want to leave it with that. Look into Nikki Lauda, super interesting personality. And I want to dive a bit more into it, and maybe a couple of episodes down the line, we take him back on and see what else we can find. It's very interesting guy.
Good find.
See you in the next episode.